today's show is going to be a lot of fun. If you are involved in the music industry, especially if you are heavily involved in the school music market through repair rentals, you're going to definitely love this episode. My guest today is Bill Mathews, and Bill's the executive director for NAPBIRT, the National Association of Professional Band Instrument Repair Technicians. That's a mouthful. And we're going to talk things all kind of band repair related, and which is going to be really exciting because at this point, honestly, I'm convinced that Bill has forgotten more about repair than I will ever know. But I'm really excited to have this conversation today. So, Bill, welcome.
Thank you very much, Donovan. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. It was a little bit of back and forth to get our schedules to align. I think I started reaching out as we were, I think maybe even entering into rental season, knowing that wouldn't be a good time for me, but I at least wanted to get it out there. And my good friend Lyndon Lance, we owe him a shout out too, because he's the one that suggested this idea and also got us together. So Lyndon, I know you're listening, so thank you so much. So this is going to be a really fun topic, and just so the audience let's catch the audience up a little bit. You know, as Bill and I were kind of just chatting before I started recording, I was just sharing a few things, and one thing that I was telling him as I was getting ready to start saying, like, the issue of stores needing repair techs has never been greater today, and every store owner I know is trying to find two things really: good repair technicians and a good collections company. And but as I started to say that, I started realizing, actually, as long as I've been in this industry, every store owner, manager that I've ever known has always been on the lookout for good repair techs. And Bill shared as well that even when he was in repair school, like, this has been in demand. So the demand for repair technicians is nothing new. This is something that has been ongoing. But I'm curious to see from your perspective, on the other side of it, on the student side of it, what have you seen changes recently in, like, the interest of people getting into repair? Because from our perspective, we are seeing that change, and it seems like there's a renewed interest in younger people wanting to get into repair. And I'm curious from your level, which mine's more anecdotal of just what I'm experiencing in Missouri and Kansas, but you, of course, being the director for NAPBIRT, you're getting a much broader view. What have you seen in that shift in, say, the last 5 to 10 years or so?
Well, I think to put a little bit of that into perspective, I have two sons, and they're 21 and 25. So I have children in that age range of folks that are kind of coming into the repair industry. And I'm seeing of that age group people who are not afraid to try something new, and they're not afraid to work with their hands. They're not afraid to, learn skills. Obviously, with the internet, and we were kind of laughing about that earlier, there's access to information that, frankly, 40 years ago didn't exist. And so, as an example, when I started looking into this, I was in high school, and we went to the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor had never even heard of anybody that repaired instruments, that didn't know that this was a thing anyone ever did. And then I went to my local music store, and that's how I got connected. And so what I'm seeing is, I think I'm seeing younger people get into the industry. When I was in school, there were 2 or 3 of us that were in, 20 or under. And then the rest of them had multiple college degrees. There were people that were retired from their career and were starting a new career. And so by and large, the class was, upper 20s to, from the 30s into their even 60s and 70s that were starting repair. And I'm seeing, I believe, from my, talking to the repair schools out there, that it seems like the age is getting younger. And
my experience echoes exactly what you're describing. And I think you really pulled out something that is interesting. I think you're onto something there. You're right. When I was younger, so I'd shared with you before we began recording that unlike maybe a lot of store owners, especially historically, I don't have any repair ability or skills myself. And I think that may be more common now today, but I think for the history of a school music dealer, as we look about, school music dealer owners and managers over the last 50 years, I bet the majority of those had some amount of repair skill, and I have none. And part of that is growing up, while my dad was very handy, and my dad, knew how to do carpentry and kind of basic skills and things like that. By the time I was born and came around, my parents separated, and he never taught those skills to me. And I remember becoming a homeowner and having no idea how to do anything. And so I just always thought, like, well, I'm just not mechanically inclined. I'm not good with my hands. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. And it just seems so overwhelming. And that I just kind of, never pursued it, just thought, well, I just can't do it. But I think you're right. I think the younger folks today, they're accustomed to, when they don't know how to do something, to go to YouTube and like watch and learn how to do it. And they just look at it as yet another skill to learn, and they're not perturbed or dismayed by that, which is a credit to them. Because I think sometimes, especially as generations get older, sometimes we look at the younger generations and we just think, these damn kids today, get off my lawn. We tend to think that they're not as good as we were at that age, which I've always been opposed to. I've always thought that was a really silly idea that didn't really hold any water. But I think you're right. I think that they have this mindset of like, well, I may not know how to do it or have the skills, but I can go learn how to do it.
As an example, when I thought about me thinking about the industry from that perspective at my young age starting out, making an instrument was not something you would even consider. Mm-hmm. We had one person in our class that wanted to make French horns. That was his hope. He's a friend of mine. A lot of people in our industry know him, Ken Pope, in the Northeast. And he was just dead set that he was going to make French horns. I'm thinking, why would anybody make horns? And then you have people another person that many of us know, Mike Corrigan,
of course,
who decided, I'm going to make trombones. And so now he has a trombone factory.
Yeah.
That is not a major, it's not Conselmer. It's not, it's not
right.
Getson. It's a guy that had an idea and said, I can do this. And it's just incredible. And so, with the resources we have available, and I'm always cautious about that because some of, those same resources have good ideas and bad ideas on them.
Sure.
For the betterment, for whoever's making that recording, they feel like they're putting out good information and they may not have any background.
Right.
And so, and as we all know, the loudest person in the room tends to be the expert. And that's not always the case either. But to be able to weed through that information and find the gems, find the value, find the stuff that's out there, and then utilize that. I mean, frankly, we do that at home all the time. I'm actually rebuilding a lathe right now. And I've been on 3 YouTube channels today to help me get through the process. Because earlier in the day, I looked at the parts manual for the lathe. It was no help at all.
Right.
50 years ago, that parts manual would have been drawn by a draftsman.
Right.
And you would have been able to see all the details.
Right.
And so now it's a matter of, I'm watching some 20-some-year-old put new gears in his head of his lathe. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's how we do it.
Right.
That's the order the gears go in. They don't go this way. I don't want to have to take apart another machine to see how it's supposed to go back together.
Yeah. So as we think about this, folks in general getting into repair, but specifically the younger folks that are getting into it, and like you said, I when I look in my shop right now, I can see that. I can see some of our better techs that we've got right now. We've got a couple of young guys in our main repair facility that they've been with us now for several years, so they're pretty seasoned in techs. They're very serious about their craft and what they do. They're obviously NAPBIRT members and go to conferences and things like that. But I remember when both those guys started with us, they were young and green and pretty wet behind the ears. And so it's exciting to see them develop and turn into these more seasoned kind of veterans that are now training and helping other folks. Matter of fact, one of our brass techs, AJ Lee, is in one of our other locations, been in there for the last 3 days helping to train some of the technicians at the other locations. And to me, I'm so excited to see that, because I remember when AJ was the one getting trained.
Yeah.
But I also can picture we've got a couple of new folks that I'm not exactly sure how old they are, but to me, they look like they're incredibly young. I believe they're both younger than 20 that are essentially apprenticing in the shop today. And it just seems like there's such an interest from that generation. And I can understand why there's could be a big appeal for that. From your perspective, what do you think is the appeal for folks that want to get into repair, instrument repair specifically?
Well, I'm going to use a word that is a common phrase now. I think I adapt it to myself. But being a maker, people have turned on to, I want to make stuff. And so, and again, with the assistance of the internet and all the resources, you can make stuff and then have a worldwide market for it. And so making is common nowadays. Right. Whether you're, a full-time retail salesperson at a music store and at home you knit caps, but you have a worldwide market for it now. And so so making has become a thing that's more than just like, I've been making since I was a kid, but we didn't call it that, And so I did grow up in a situation where I was fortunate to have, my dad was the first person in our recorded history of our family that did not farm, but we lived on a farm. And he was a machinist. So I had access to every tool you could imagine. Right. I started buying my own tools when I was 10, and I haven't stopped. But I think the young people today are not afraid to make stuff. And if you're a music person, if you have an interest in music, if you're a musician who, when you look at, again, I did this myself, when you're a senior in high school and you look at your options as a musician, as a high school musician, the traditional path was to become a music educator. That's because that's your number one influence is your music educator.
Yeah.
And so you're just going to follow that path. And I have a friend, a technician friend, who followed that path because that's the only path he knew to follow. And he was going to repair, he was nearing, probably in his senior year, and had to take chose to take an instrument repair course for band directors, and discovered the world of instrument repair.
Right.
Stayed in university one more year and finished a business degree instead of a education degree.
Yeah.
And then went to repair school. And so I think that the world out there of people who are willing to work with their hands and wanting to work with their hands, tied together with their love of music and their interest in music, that's the perfect marriage for someone who wants to become a musical instrument repair technician. And that's exactly where I was. I was a player. I was an okay player. I wasn't awesome. But I was a good mechanic. And so I think that's where young people today, I think there's an openness in the world of it's okay to make stuff, whether it's making stuff with Legos or clay or knitting or woodworking or anything. And you can apply that to instrument repair.
I think you're exactly right. You mentioned Legos, and something that I found interesting, even though a little odd. My adult son he and his lifelong best friend, they've each gotten into Legos as an adult. I think his friend probably played with Legos as a child. I know my son didn't. I loved Legos as a kid. I remember buying him some Legos to try to get into it, and he just never, ever cared about them. But as an adult, he has. And I think you're kind of onto a point there, because if we think about, I think about what I do a lot right now, how I spend most of my time at work and at home. I feel like I'm constantly in front of a screen, and it gets pretty old after a while. I'm during the day, first thing I'm looking at my phone, generally checking emails, and then I go into work and I'm opening up my laptop, and I'm either in email or I'm working in some kind of development suite for video or something else, or I'm in our point of sale and accounting package doing something like that. All day long, I'm basically staring at a screen unless I have a welcome relief of getting like an in-person meeting or something. And I'm one of those people that I love meetings. So I like getting to talk with people and stuff like that. And then I go home and there's usually some amount of, I'm looking at more screens again for entertainment. And I think, if in today's world where kids have been surrounded by screens constantly, to get away from one of those for a little while and get to work with your hands and see something tangible and real that you've done. This clarinet came in and like the keys were binding and these notes were speaking. And then after I spent 45 minutes on it, now it works well. And I know this is going to go to some kid who hopefully is going to appreciate it, that this now plays right. And like, it's a very tangible, visceral thing. I could see how that would be very appealing. That is something we should communicate. But I think another thing that you mentioned, because you mentioned about, people either going the college route or something else and deciding that they wanted to shift. That's probably another thing that makes repair so appealing, is while there is certainly education required either through apprenticeship or through repair schools, it's not the same length of paid education, especially education you're paying for where you're not getting paid, as a traditional degree. And like music education now has often crept up into being like a 5-year degree or more, to go out and make decent money as an educator. Whereas a repair technician, repair schools are often 6 months to 2 years, kind of depending how comprehensive they are, and then you're able to get out and enter the workforce, often making similar compensation, sometimes better than what an educator would make. And so that would also, I think, be quite appealing. Because you're right. I think a lot of us, I know for myself, I was a better than average musician and loved playing. I still love playing today. It's probably my number one avocation. I feel like I do everything else I do so that I can play. But I knew I was not good enough to play professionally. And I grew up really poor. And so I'd kind of had enough of the toil and struggle of poverty. So I wanted to try the other side. And so that didn't have as much appeal as being a musician for that. And so I also went the music education route. But fortunately, by providence or good luck, landed a part-time job in a music store in college, and that just changed my world entirely. But I could totally see why repair would be such a interesting option for someone younger who thinks like, I want to do something tangible. I want to do something that makes a difference in people's lives. And I want to do something that doesn't require me to spend 4 or 5 years in a collegiate program, where a lot of times even younger folks get into these collegiate programs as kind of a wandering generality, trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives. And the whole time they're trying to figure it out, they're spending gobs and gobs of money for this education, often being borrowed through student loans that then later has to be paid back. And that can just seem like such a trap, that repair can seem like a much, much more attractive option. And then factor in the fact that you can always find a job. Music stores are always looking for repair technicians, and you can work basically anywhere you want in the country. So, I think I'm going to quit what I'm doing and go learn how to repair. I'm going to go learn how to use the screwdriver and a pair of pliers. And maybe I don't think they'll let me use any of the flame items, but the rest of it, how much damage could I do?
You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. I think one of the challenges in our industry, because there is a great need for repair technicians, hands down, there's no argument there. The challenge with our industry is that it's so multifaceted, and it is not easy. It is not an easy trade.
Right.
Looking into some other trades that are in the service side of things, my oldest son is a professional knife maker, and he's also a professional sharpener. And the sharpening world of we'll just narrow it down to hair products, so hair scissors, shears, and clipper blades. It's fascinating. There's so much interesting things to learn there. But once you learn how to sharpen those two things, it's just the variables of those two things.
Mm-hmm.
Say you're going to be for the first many years of my career, I was the only technician in my shop.
Mm-hmm.
2 different companies I worked for. I fixed everything, I come up with this years ago because it happened. I work on everything. What do you fix? Well, I fix everything from what did I say? Auto harps to zithers,
Right.
because everything came in.
Yep.
Everything. You're the music guy. Can you fix this?
Yep.
I'll figure it out. I mean, the first time I've touched an accordion, I had never touched one. And
I was getting ready to say accordion. Yep.
they came in for repair and they said, "Can you fix it?" And I said, "Sure." They didn't ask had I fixed one. They asked,
Right.
could I fix one?
Right.
And once I took it apart, it's like, oh yeah, this is pretty basic stuff. I learned a lot of stuff, but it was successful in the end. But in our industry in repair, there's so much variation. Just say, if you only work on flutes, that's it. The variation from a student model flute to a high-end custom pro model flute from a dozen different manufacturers, the variation is great.
Mm-hmm.
And then you throw in all the other instruments of the orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of knowledge a person needs to be a good general technician is huge.
Yeah.
And I think that's overlooked a lot. And I think it also overwhelms people after they get in the trade and then they get out of the trade, because they don't have enough passion for the desire to learn over and over and over, because it's a daily, you're learning something all the time. And I think it can be overwhelming for people. And so there's a lot of turnover in the industry. And unfortunately, in a large portion of the repair world, people aren't compensated for all that knowledge they carry.
Mm-hmm.
And shops tend to be, we're really not going to talk about numbers here, but tend to be on the low side of service fees.
Mm-hmm.
But their customers don't have a lot to spend, whether their customer be the mom and dad or the customer be the school district or whomever. But they're on the other side of that. If your phone breaks, we don't seem to have a problem to drop $700 on a new phone.
Yep.
I
am convinced, Bill, I'm convinced that you're right. I'm convinced that those excuses are bullshit. Because that is the things we tell ourselves, but damn it, like, music's worth it. It's worth, what we do is worthwhile. It's worth being compensated for. It's extremely important to the educational process. It's extremely important to the depth and quality of life. So the things we do matter, and we should be paid fairly for it. And so even though I don't know anything about repair, like, I staunchly look at other things that I or our business pays for in terms of service. And, many of those things I look at and think, like, okay, we're paying, I mean, back in the day, it would not be uncommon to pay $75 to $100 an hour for some kind of service that you were doing. Anymore, that would honestly probably be a bargain for most things. But I would look at that and I would think, I remember even talking once to someone that they were bringing in to do some networking things for us. And I knew how much we were paying their company to do that. And I asked the person who's doing the work, like, what his background was, like, what was his education, like, how much did he have to study to get to be standing here in front of me today to do this? And I remember it being like no more than what a repair technician would be. And at that point, like, I bet our repair shop was charging probably 60% of the wage, 50 to 60% of the hourly rate of what this other business was. And I immediately thought, we got to raise our prices. Like, this is ridiculous. Or I take a vehicle in for service and, like, you see how much their service rate is. Now, they've also got some, very, very expensive tooling, and their shop needs are large. We don't need a huge bay to work on a flute. So there's a little bit of, like, scale that we can factor in of, like, all right, the amount of space it takes to work on an F-150, there's a cost to that. The computer work that's required to be able to do there's a cost to that. So if the Ford dealer's charging $150 an hour, maybe we can't be at that, but man, we should certainly be higher than 60. And so you start finding something that you think is equivalent and fair. But I totally think you're right. And that's something we're currently dealing with right now with an acquisition we had, where there's a general mindset of, like, well, the parents don't have money for instruments, and the schools don't quite have the money either. I'm like, well, like, we have people that want to make a living here. Like, we have to, like, these people have to pay. And you're right. Like, People, they have the money when they need the phone. They have the money when they need their car repair. They have the money for everything else. They don't have the money when it comes to music. I'm not buying it. So,
well, and you talked about the cost of tools at the auto shop. This is a screwdriver. This, not the handle, just the blade is $50.
oh my gosh.
And, we don't have one.
Right. Yeah. Right.
The argument about, and if you buy a 3/8 drive socket set, whether you buy a Craftsman or a Proto or a Milwaukee or a Snap-on,
Sure.
It's still a 3/8 socket set, and it works on every vehicle that comes in,
Right.
and it will work the rest of your life.
Yep.
And tools, tools are tools, and tools
That's
are
right.
expensive. But the other side, when you're selling tools, is the other side, or when you're buying tools, is that tool's gonna make me money, and I need a good one so that I don't have to replace it all the time.
Sure. I feel so fortunate, like with our technicians. I sometimes I feel like they're more conservative with our budget than I would be. But every time that they come in and advocate for a new tool, they do such a great job of explaining to me, like, I can do either this much more work in the same amount of time, or this thing that usually does that. And they do a nice job of understanding, like, this tool, I do this thing 12 times a year. And if I had this tool, it would reduce the cost. So this is a good investment. And but yeah, man, let's do it. Like, anything that saves you time
Sure.
or allows you to do even better quality work, like, let's do that, because saving you time or allowing us to do better quality work allows us to be more profitable in the long run. We had talked about, so there are some people that maybe foolishly get into repair thinking that, like, oh, it's going to be easy, that it won't be that difficult, and there won't be a lot to learn. And then when they get in and see that, no, there is a lot here to learn, to excel and be excellent at it, they get dismayed and leave. I don't really care so much about those people, but I care about the other ones. Let's talk about some other reasons for attrition. Because I think that same thing that those people don't like are what other people tend to love about repair, is the fact that there's always, if you're the kind of person that you like to solve problems, I like challenges, I like puzzles, I like these things, I like knowing that every day may not be the same thing, that there might be a change. Instrument repair is going to absolutely appeal to you for that.
Yeah.
What are some of the other reasons that we're losing repair technicians through attrition that you've seen?
Well, like other reasons besides, I think a lot of times the shops, the technicians aren't making a living wage, and so they're trying to move on. There's a lot of people, and I'm hoping this is changing with time, but there's a lot of people that have music stores that hire repair technicians, who don't treat them as a valued part of their team.
Yep.
And that matters. I mean, I've talked to some store owners where they'll say, oh yeah, well, we took 5 people to the NAMM show last year. Well, how many are you going to send to NAPBIRT conference? Oh, we can't afford to do that. Okay. So, immediately I know where they stand.
Well, you almost often hear the opposite of, or not the opposite, but you hear people say, oh, I can't afford to go to NAMM, can't afford to go to NAPBIRT. Like, man, if you're in that dire of a situation, you can't afford not to go to either one of those things. Like, I mean, those are investments that have paid off in our business.
Sure.
And you're right. I think there is some amount of store owners, and I'm hoping that that as those folks transition businesses to maybe younger people that recognize the value of human capital and human labor, that we're paying them appropriately. I know in our company, we really try to work hard to make sure that it's a win-win for both us and the repair technician. And we try to set comp plans that make it where they can make a good living, but the company also, we make money from this as well. Sure. And I think hand in hand, like, we each can see, like, we can both thrive together. And by that type of partnership, it makes things like, if we need to increase prices or improve efficiency, or frankly, even right now, like with our repair technicians helping to train other technicians, everyone sees the value in that. They see how it helps us in the long run. And we've got a teamwork and people willing to make that investment in each other and in the company to keep that going. But I make sure that our people are paid well. And I even here recently, a couple of months ago, I reached out to a good friend of mine, or a new friend of mine, I should say, Kevin Stiles from Heritage Music Repair up in the Kansas City area, to get his input on compensation, because I wanted to make sure that we were paying our people fairly. I thought we were paying them well, but I also recognize that I'm not as into this field as he is, and maybe my assumptions are wrong. And so after speaking with him and kind of sharing what we were compensating, he validated that, you know, what we're on the right path. But I think if there's a store owner that's listening that isn't looking at their repair team as a extremely valuable asset, as a good profit center, and as a necessary part of our business, and a part of our business that can give us distinction. I mean, I think I've been fortunate. I share with you, the 2 retail music companies I've worked for had repair at the heart of it. And so I've just been indoctrinated that like repair is the thing that can set us apart. But if a store owner doesn't feel that way, man, they got to get with the times, because it's a huge competitive advantage being able to offer quality repair for schools and or customers. So I don't understand the mindset of not wanting to pay people what they're worth. So
well, and I also think that in some cases, not all, but in some, I've experienced it, the repair technician isn't accounted for necessarily across the board in the store appropriately. For instance, I can't tell you how many times. So I worked in retail repair for many, many years. But how many times a person would bring me their instrument and I would convince them that their instrument there was no value of their instrument. They needed to replace it. Now, if it had sentimental value, that's a different thing. But we don't want to start your daughter in 5th grade band on this clarinet. It's not going to help her.
Sure.
It's going to be the problem in the equation. So let's go up front and let's look at a rental clarinet or maybe a new clarinet. And so in that case, and I say this kind of as a joke, but I actually experienced this. So go up to the storefront, the person leaning against the counter all day stands up and they gets behind the counter and how can I help you? Well, this guy said I needed to buy a new clarinet. Oh, well, let me show you what we have. And then they got a commission.
Yep.
And the repair shop got nothing.
Right.
In fact, we turned work away that we would have been paid for on commission.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so also, and I'm sure you know, the value of repair in just having a rental in having your rental.
Gosh. Yep.
And in working in school music, I don't know how you work in school music business without a repair shop. I don't think you can.
Yeah, you really don't.
And so there's a value to that just having a repair shop brings to that side of the business, but it's not necessarily accounted toward repair. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're bringing up a good point. I think if a store owner is not compensating their repair technicians fairly, I think looking at those things as some of those opportunities where those techs are contributing might help to justify in their minds why it's worth paying them what they're worth. Yeah. And you're right, whether it's the maintenance fees that you're collecting on your rentals, or the fact that your rental instruments are serviced and ready to be put out for rent, I mean, that repair technician is making that happen. The ones that are a little harder to track are the kind of the intangibles, like you just mentioned about the times that the repair technician turns away work and turns that over to a rental or a sale. But if one had the desire, and if that was, certainly I would tell our techs, certainly if any of our techs are listening, if that's a thing that happens with regularity, then we should create a system to track that, because I'd be happy to compensate for that. If it's a thing that happens every once in a while, well, then, wouldn't be worth the effort to track it. But if it's a thing that happens pretty regularly, then we should show some appreciation to the folks making the referral for that sale. Absolutely.
I think the good news here, though, is I believe that in the music store owners that I've talked to that are younger, maybe not younger in age, but younger in the progressive, methods of, modern methods of running retail, they grasp it. And those are the people that I want to recommend. If I were to recommend going to work for a store, because sometimes I get those questions, well, who should I work for? And, I don't always have an input in that. But if I do know about those stores they're looking at, I can say, well, this one does, I know they do this and they take care of their people, whereas this one is still stuck in 1956 and hasn't changed. And again, I have experience in those places. So
Yep.
they exist. But I believe that they're becoming fewer and farther between. So that's good.
That old adage of just paying them just enough so they won't quit, and then the employee's going to work just hard enough to not get fired. Like, that is not a recipe for success for either party.
One of the things that kind of goes back to the original question here, a store owner not long ago asked me, well, you know, I keep losing technicians. What do I need to do? And I said, well, I can tell you this from experience also. It's cheaper to stay home. It costs a lot of money to move.
Yeah.
If the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, it's not always about the other side of the fence is grass. It might be that your grass is brown and you need to do something about it.
That's true.
And so what are you doing? It's not what bait is out there to lure them away. It's like, what are you doing to drive them off?
Yeah.
Because many times it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot better off if you just stay. If you got somebody that's moved into your community, bought a house, has a spouse, has a child, possibly, they're in the school district, and all that stuff, those people don't want to move.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're getting established here. Don't make life so bad that I have to move. So what is it that's driving them off? And then in some occasions, that's the situation. But I think that as time goes on, it seems that those situations are fewer and farther between, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you bring up a good point for sure. I think anyone who's having a turnover problem, really in any aspect of your business, should really look at that to see, like, what is it that's causing that? Like, it has to be something internal that's driving that. I mean, we all have some roles that, like, we have a shipping and receiving role that just has higher turnover than a store manager role. Like, that's just kind of par for the course for some of those positions. And a lot of it can be due to just the burnout of doing that physical type of job, which I can understand that. But if one is turning through repair technicians a lot, yeah, I think that's definitely something to be aware of. I would say this just to kind of maybe to make the point from the store owner side. If the repair technician isn't speaking up and being vocal about the changes that are needed, because one can do that in a way that's beneficial and helpful, and not just necessarily like negative or critical. But if one comes in with the mindset of, like, I want to help make this company better from the inside as an employee, here's some of the things that I'm seeing that I think are problems that could be opportunities for us to make this a better place to work. They need to bring those things to light. And I think maybe I'm just going to say this because this has just recently happened to me this year. Sometimes we should be wary of the grass being greener on the other side. So I had a few technicians this summer that I had a couple of different competitors tried to poach off. And of course, I find out about it, kind of after the fact. And most cases, all but one, I was able to kind of ward them off and everything else. But especially for the ones that had been courted but didn't leave, I found that the competitor was painting this very, very rosy picture of how grand life was over there. And come to find out, I mean, at the time I knew there's no way this is not true. And then their inability to deliver their summer repairs on time just proved to me that life is not as rosy over there as what they had led it on to believe. But sometimes, a wily competitor will make it sound like, oh, you're not being treated fairly over there, or it sounds like they're not listening to you very well. They can get that little bug in the ear about everything else, about how bad your current situation is and how wonderful it'd be with them. And I would just encourage you, as if you're any employee, really, before you listen to that person, like, go talk to the people on your team first to see if you can't make your place a better place to work. Yeah. And to the credit of most of our guys, they did that. We came back, we talked through it, and we came up with something that was really kind of fair for everybody and worked for everyone. And in the case of one, it didn't work. And that one was frustrating because I had a repair technician, a good technician, nice person, get lured away by a competitor that I thought was a very friendly competitor. who proved himself to be not so friendly after all. So next time that guy needs help, he can pound sand. But yes, a very similar situation. It got relayed to me, the kind of things he was telling to her. I'm like, okay, like that's not really fair. That's not a fair statement to make. So
one of the things that I do encourage young technicians is when they're looking for a position or looking to move or whatever the case, it's about interviewing the company as much as it is about them interviewing you.
Absolutely.
You need to fit into their culture. And
Yep.
if their culture and that, I kind of had that thought in mind before we had that last little piece. And I'm sorry about the sunshine here. It's a west facing window, and
you look like
I'm kind of bleeding out as we.
Yeah, you look like you're in a J.J. Abrams film from the mid 2000s.
I'm still here. I'm still here, even if you can't see me. But it's a matter of having, as you mentioned, having those technicians. They need to advocate for themselves. But if they're not in a situation where that culture is open to them to mention, it's a difficult thing, because I worked in, like I said, several shops that weren't that way. When I had the opportunity to become a repair shop manager, one of the things that I brought to the table was, we're going to have team meetings. We're going to get together. And the challenge with some of those in the past is those team meetings, like the store team meetings happened, but the repair shop was left out.
Yep.
And so that doesn't develop a culture for the repair technicians to feel comfortable going to their supervisors or the owner of the store or whomever to have those conversations.
True.
But if you have, and like we've talked about some people that are friends of ours, mutual, and I believe they have these communities within their store that are open arms, that everybody has a say, everybody's voices has a value. Doesn't mean everything you want you get, of course not.
Sure.
It has to be, it has to meet the needs of the organization, but
right.
But you had a say.
Yep.
So
now that's a really good point, and I kind of realized how, as you're saying that, how unique our situation is. So as a multi-location retailer, this is often very difficult because a lot of times, all of your employees are spread amongst other locations, and just the reality is you don't get the face time with them that you would, like in the case of Lyndon Lance at Bandwagon Repair in Tennessee, where he's got a single location, all of his employees are there, and so he gets to have a lot of face time with each one. We're unique in the fact that where our corporate offices are also our main band repair facility and warehouse. So if anything, our repair techs are generally better in the loop than anybody else, just because we see them every day, and they're actually in the building with us. But I think you're right. At most other organizations, it's likely the very opposite, because the repair technicians are usually, off in the shop or a broom closet, or wherever we've stuck them somewhere with no natural light or anything else. And, and they're kind of treated like mushrooms. We just sort of leave them in the dark and just feed them a bunch of manure and just kind of leave them alone. And so they're often out of the loop. And one's got to be intentional about getting those folks included.
But on the other hand, I do know stores. A good friend of mine owns a store that owns a company that they're repair technicians. I don't know how many times a year, probably only 1 or 2 times a year, but they get together as a group.
Yep.
Just like he does with his ed reps. His ed reps don't all work out of the same location. They have 3 locations. But they get together regular enough that they're all on the same page. And he does the same with his repair shop. So, and it's not, like I said, it's not as often, but it's not needed as often.
Right. Our guys do that. And the beautiful thing with our team, I mean, they know we encourage and support it, but they just handle that on their own. Yeah. They set up their own meetings and organize all those things. Like I said, we're very, very fortunate to have the people that we've got. But having that continuing education helps all of them and helps them to build those relationships together. Yeah. I think that's really important. To kind of go back to just something that just kind of hit me as we were discussing, I think if one is a store owner or someone who's in charge of operating a retail store, if as you're looking at those repair technicians, I think you need to be intentional about how you include them in what you're doing. And I think you also need to be very intentional about how you think about their compensation. And if you're in a situation where you're not able to compensate fairly for folks, fairly or even better, depending on their quality and skill, then I think you have to accept that as like, that's your responsibility. Like I'm in a situation right now where I feel because of the shifting landscape of retail sales right now, I'm having a difficult time compensating my retail salespeople in a way that's appropriate for them, but also works for the company. And it's weighing on my mind a lot, and I'm trying to solve that problem. And so I think if one feels like, well, I can't afford to pay my repair techs what other places can or whatever, that's your responsibility to get that figured out. And you don't have to do it alone either. You likely can involve these same repair technicians in these conversations, and they likely have ideas of ways you can succeed together. And another unsolicited plug for NAPBIRT, but if your repair technicians are attending NAPBIRT and developing their personal network, they likely have a network of other successful repair shops that they could reach out to see how those people would handle those challenges and problems.
Yeah.
So I think it just really adds to that value. But you as a store owner or manager, you have to take ownership and the responsibility for figuring out how to make sure your people are well compensated.
Yeah, and you touched on a word there that is really one of the biggest benefits of being part of NAPBIRT, being a NAPBIRT member, is the network.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this for years here. If somebody to call me and say, I have this model of this instrument and this is the problem, what do I do?
Yep.
Now, there was a time when I could answer that question, but that time has passed because I've been off the retail repair bench for over 2 decades.
Yep.
And so I don't feel qualified to answer that question necessarily. Some questions are pretty basic, but the real nitty-gritty repair questions, I'm not an expert. And
Mm-hmm.
so the benefit of NAPBIRT, one of the major benefits of NAPBIRT is literally the network, because I can give you names and phone numbers of 5 people that have the answers.
Yep.
And if any one of those, because they're part of NAPBIRT and they understand what NAPBIRT is and why we do what we do, any one of those will give you names and numbers of 5 more people.
Yep.
So your network just exploded.
Yep.
Just to get that one question answered.
Yep.
And so that's that having that network is paramount to success, I believe.
Without a doubt. I mean, to me, it's the number one value of going to something like NAM, going to something like NASMD, going to something like NAPBIRT. There's a bunch of other benefits to those things, the educational seminars, maybe seeing the products and stuff like that. But man, that network is the game changer. If I've got a question, like when I've had questions about training, hiring, finding, compensating repair technicians, being able to talk to Kevin Stiles, be able to talk to Lyndon Lance, having a bench of people I can go to when I have questions about, ownership transitions and business financial questions, being able to talk to the team at Friedman Cannonberg, being able to talk to the folks at West Music, being able to, I've got a number of folks I know I can reach out to. If I've got questions about marketing in today's age and efficiency and how we're using things, I've got my good friends at the Chapmans that own the acoustic shop here in town that I can reach out to and talk to. I've got this network of people that when I run into a problem that I don't know how to solve, I know people that probably know how to solve it or can give me advice or be a sounding board. And those things have contributed so much monetary value to my business and my life that, again, for people who say they can't afford it, my answer is you can't afford not to. I mean, if you can't afford to send your repair techs to a NAPBIRT conference, which is frankly always a very affordable, reasonably priced conference, especially the regional stuff is a no-brainer, then you're not even in business. You just got a hobby, I guess, because it's definitely not and this is, again, not just a plug. It's not an expense, and it's an investment.
Yeah.
And those things pay off for sure.
the funny thing about our events, I kind of say it's funny. It's one of those parts of our events that you can't advertise. There's no way to advertise it. There's no way to market it. But those spaces between the clinics, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the 30-minute coffee breaks, the drive from here to the event, to the dinner site, those places, the repair talk never stops.
Right.
Just like if you're going to the NAM show, the music conversation doesn't stop. And many times when you're going to NAM, you end up sitting next to someone on the airplane that's going to NAM too, and the same way coming home. So the shop talk never ends.
Right.
And there's so much value of just that.
Yep.
Because that's where your network develops.
That's exactly right.
That's where one of my favorite things about going to an NAPBIRT or walking through a conference, that I spend about 3 years building each conference. And so I always have one coming up and two in the hopper. And so, but one of my favorite parts about the NAPBIRT conference is walking through the lobby between events and seeing these groups of people standing around. And sometimes this is just one of my favorite things of all, is seeing a new person who's their badge says that they're a first timer, walk up to a group, uninvited, unknown, and they just immediately just envelope them and they become part of the conversation, and they just met 5 new people.
Right.
And that's priceless.
Yeah.
That's priceless. And the knowledge they gain from that time there is priceless. And then the lifetime, in many cases, lifetime friendships they develop. And every year you meet new people.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly right.
And it goes for any kind of trade show, any kind of event for your industry, whatever part of that industry it is. But it's the value is there, and it's it is an investment in yourself or in your employees, and it's a worthwhile investment.
Well, and the other thing that we've kind of been hinting around, but just to make sure it's abundantly clear, any of us that attend these shows have seen this for ourselves, especially once you have a network of friends that you look forward to seeing. When I come back from any of these trade shows that I come back fired up, wired up, and like ready to work.
Yeah.
And my technicians, when they come back from NAPBIRT, they're the same way. Ed reps coming back from NASMD are the same way. And that recharge that you get is so critical, especially for those of us who've been in this for a while. Like it can be a little monotonous sometimes. And so this year, I couldn't attend the NAM show because it was this exact same time as our state music educators convention, and so I needed to be at the state convention. And I feel like I've just felt that all year long. I've missed that boost, that recharge that I get from being around my friends and being inspired by other people. So that's such a critical thing. So yeah, store owners, we've kind of talked about like some of our retention. We're going to make sure our folks are compensated well. We're going to make sure that we're providing a good place to work. We're going to make sure we're creating great open dialogue so that everyone's heard and everyone understands the decisions we're making as a company. We're being inclusive to make sure those techs are included. We talked a little bit about what could attract folks into getting in the repair field. But as we think about like the recruitment side of it, what else can we be doing to make sure, because as you were saying, when you were younger, you were kind of even unaware that band instrument repair was even a career. What else can we do to reach out to those folks, especially those students that, they've played in their high school band, they love music, they don't really want to be a music educator, but they're just not sure what other options there are for them. What can we do to put music, band instrument repair, band orchestra instrument repair on their radar for career options?
Yeah, and I have a lot to say about this.
Okay, good.
So
solve this problem for us.
Years ago, I did a NAM clinic. I taught a NAM clinic maybe 2 or 3 times on how to find repair technicians. And of course, you can imagine it was standing room only.
Sure.
And going to a lot of seminars over the years, I saw a lot of good speakers that had some kind of a little gimmick, a little thing. So I created for myself seed packets, like garden seed packets.
Mm-hmm.
and and inside it was simply my business card. But the whole gist of my talk was grow your own. Okay, so we'll come back to that. But from at the high school level, one of the things that's kind of interesting and fairly new on the horizon is high school programs that are being offered in instrument repair.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few around the country, and they're
Mm-hmm.
growing. I believe primarily because there's becoming federal dollars available for these kinds of programs to be put into schools,
Mm-hmm.
force development type programs in all trades. And finally, repair is becoming recognized as a trade
Right.
after a million years. And so there's programs like that. But I think, and this is going to be reached out, kind of put out there at the music educator conference level, where convincing music educators to encourage their students who may be like me and maybe like you, who have really good music skills, but not good enough to be Roger Bobo.
Mm-hmm.
I was a tuba player. I had to work really hard at being an okay tuba player. Wasn't going to be a tuba player.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't want to be a teacher. But my band director recognized that. He recognized that I was in the wood shop and I was in the ag shop of my school, and I was doing shop related things. And I was also in every music program in the school, choir and band. And so he put those things together and encouraged me to look into the instrument. And that's what I did. I'm still looking into it. And so that's one level that people can help guide young people into the industry, is to help them be aware of it. And frankly, I think the music educator has a lot of influence there.
Yeah.
And then the other side is, if you're a store owner and you're looking for that summer help, you're looking for wipe up people and flush people, and that people that you need to bring on for a set period of time to work at minimum wage or whatever, that they're going to just help crank out stuff that's easy to train. Those people, if they have a passion for it, if you recognize that they have maybe a knack, and this is where the grow your own comes in. And I've seen it happen. I've been preaching it for years. I've seen it happen, and it's successful. You bring those kids in, you bring those young people in, and you work with them, and they become part of your culture. They're from your town.
Mm-hmm.
And then you invest in them. You send them to repair school. You pay for them to go to repair school. And then as a commitment to you, they come back to you for a set period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a contract with them. And I've seen this happen, and I've seen it happen very successfully, where they've developed a well-meaning high school kid that may not have been university bound to go into a trade, and ended up being, the shop manager, and they have 4 shops.
Mm-hmm.
Because that music store owner invested in that person.
Yep.
And developed them. And one of the other, we were talking earlier about attrition. I see this all too often, and I've seen it my entire career, is that people don't think about replacing their technician until the day they don't come into work because they died 2 days ago.
Right. Yeah.
And it's sad, because when you get to be my age, between my age and the end, there's the writing's on the wall. There's going to be a point where you're not going to fix horns anymore.
Yep.
And you need to deal with it.
Yep.
You need to deal with it, even if that means doubling up, payroll, because that person that you have that's been there forever has so much knowledge.
Yep.
that need to pass it on.
Yep.
And in a lot of cases, they may not be involved in NAPBIRT or something, and so there's no outlet for them to pass it on, except for if you bring in somebody to work with them, and they can work together then that one, it passes on the information, but it also gives you a contingency plan for when that person's no longer working there. Maybe they need to retire at 62 and go fishing for the next 20 years because some people want to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but then their repair I had a guy call 3 weeks ago. He's 91. He called to pay his dues. When are you going to retire? I'm not going to retire. I love this.
Right.
That's great. I hope he has a plan because eventually his customers are going to need somebody else.
Yeah.
But growing your own technician, or finding those people that are musically inclined and hopefully mechanically inclined to make them knowledgeable about this is a real job. People do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been a challenge in our industry. It's, you don't walk into a music store and typically you don't walk into a music store and see the repair shop.
That's correct.
They're in the back, or they're downstairs. They're in another building. I love it when I walk into a repair shop or into a music store and you open the door and right behind this rack with reeds is the repair shop.
Right.
You're like looking at them. I was in one yesterday and you walk in and you're looking at the two technicians' benches. And if you turn to the left, you're looking at the sales counter. Yeah.
Yeah. Lyndon's shot bandwagon repairs like that. The store location we have in Emporia, Kansas is like that. The repair shop's just kind of right out there on the floor. But you're right. Historically, it's off the floor. Yeah.
Yeah. In some shops, it's not practical. But some shops I've seen that where they're purpose built, they have a big window, and behind that window is the service department.
Yeah.
And that's there's a benefit to that.
Absolutely.
One of the far outreaching benefits is that, hey, that fifth grader that's coming in to rent his first trumpet, that might strike a chord with him that you're not going to know about for 8 more years.
Yeah.
But it's something. It's planting the seed.
Well, as you were talking, anyone watching will notice like my head was bent down. It was obviously I was on my phone. To be clear, I was not like checking email or whatever, but as you were talking about that, it just started triggering some ideas for me. I'm like, I don't have a good memory. So I'm like, I got to jot this down or this won't stay with me. But one thought I had was like, one could pretty easily write a blog post or an info page on your site that kind of talks about the career of repair, includes resources of where people can go to learn about the education that's involved, the benefits, and many of the things that we've kind of discussed, but summarized down into a blog post, link to that blog post via a QR code. And then if you were to create a poster kind of showing repair technicians and repair and all this in a very favorable way, have a link on that QR code on that poster, and then put it up in all of the high school band and orchestra rooms you service, you could probably create more awareness in that one very affordable campaign. Probably depending on the size of the school music dealer, but maybe $100 worth of posters could probably generate a lot of interest, because there's a lot of those students that aren't even thinking of this as being something. And the reality is we need more technicians, but we don't need armies of them. Like a single tech can do quite a bit of work. So I know in our territory, gosh, if we could generate interest from a half dozen kids a year and wanting to learn about repair, that would more than fill the need that we have. So this is a thing you could easily grow your own, but maybe just waiting for them to darken your door. Hey, I've got my repair degree from this program. Can you hire me? That's probably not the best strategy. And I think what most people do is either wait for that, or they just wait till, like you said, their long-standing repair technician who's finally retired or kicked the bucket or whatever. They start frantically calling their repair schools saying, who do you have? Who do you have? I need someone now. And that's, I'm guilty of that, but also that's just not a good plan. Like you need to start planting this thing well in advance of the harvest, so you'll be ready when you need it.
Yeah. And one of the challenges too, I find, is everybody has the same question. I need a quality, experienced repair technician now. Well,
right.
That crop takes a minimum of 7 years to raise.
Yep.
And so those people that are quality experienced, have those things behind their title, they're not looking for work. And so the planning is long term and it's continuous. I have a music store owner friend, and he's like, I will interview every single person that you throw at me that has interest in repair. I may not be able to offer him a position, but I'm going to start the process of that, planting that seed that this might be a place in your future that you could come to work. But most of the time, what I get a call is, I need an experienced, great repair technician today.
Yep.
And if I had those, I would quit my job and become a repair technician broker, and be able to drive a different car every day.
Right. Well, the reality is, like what you just said, a skilled repair technician that knows how to do the repair, can do it reasonably quickly, is reasonable enough to work with, in terms of like temperament, is reliable. That person's already employed and probably making pretty good money. And if you've got all those qualities, that person's probably making pretty good money working for some other shop. So if you want that, you got to go hire that person away from them, which is difficult to do. And it's very expensive because, as you said, people generally don't want to uproot themselves and leave. They don't want to move. It's often uncomfortable. So you got to pay heavily to try to get those people over. And that's the cost if you want to do it. But you can also be more forward thinking and start to like kind of be proactive on building and raising your own. Still, I'm not saying that we don't pay those people. Of course, we got to pay our people fairly, or someone else is going to try to come and snipe them up. But if we're more proactive the whole time and thinking about it, like, we can more controllably fill our need for these technicians rather than just trying to go pick them away from someone else. To my knowledge, I don't think I've ever poached an employee from someone, because I just find that pretty distasteful. I really try to keep positive relationships with other stores, even if they're my competition. I just try to keep it positive, and I feel like doing that is pretty negative. So I would much rather be in a situation. I mean, I can't think of the number of technicians that our shop has trained, but it's considerable. I'd much rather take that long, slow, more holistic approach than just the mercenary approach of trying to go pick someone off or whatever. Now, someone's unhappy where they're at and they want to come talk to me. You can reach me at Donovan@ErnieWilliamson.com.
Right. So,
oh goodness.
And and then too, how do we get into it? Or where, if you're looking for a technician, where do you go? So there's repair schools in the U.S. There's some traditional, some that have been around for quite a while. There's a fairly new program down in just north of Atlanta, Georgia, that's now a state authorized school. And so and there are other places that train people, but as far as NAPBIRT goes, our criteria for being listed as a school is that you have to be registered as a school with your state. And so, but in, Renton Technical College in Renton, Washington, and Western Iowa Tech in Sioux City, Iowa, Southeast, what is it called now? Minnesota State Southeast Technical. They've changed their name a few times over the
just
decade.
Rolls off the tongue.
But as we, lovingly know it in the trade, it's Red Wing.
Yep.
In Red Wing, Minnesota, the same place that they make the shoes and that sort of thing. So, and that's where I went to repair school. And there's a program at Badger State in Wisconsin. And then the newest one, like I said, is Southeast Musical Institute down in Cartersville, Georgia, just north of Atlanta. And they've been online for 2 or 3 years. And so 3 of those I'm on the advisory board for, and I think most of them are running full courses. There's people on the waiting list. There's people out there looking to get in the industry. And those are the places that people need to be looking for technicians, with the full understanding that when they come out of repair school, they are an extremely well qualified apprentice. They're not going to be running the counter, overhauling pro saxophones,
Yep.
so on and so forth out of the gate. Again, having conversations with music store owners over my entire career, one of the questions when I had that frustrated one about, well, there's no qualified technicians. Like, well, what do you have a degree in? Well, in music education.
Right.
Okay, cool. How long did you go to school for that? 4 or 5 years. Awesome. And now you're running your retail store and you're doing something. I said, what do you expect out of someone that goes to repair school for 9 months?
Right.
So we have to have realistic expectations. But again, that's where they come out. I mean, those folks coming out of repair school have met minimum requirements to be qualified as a technician. There's people that you can put in your shop. They can learn from your other technicians, or if they're go-getters, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but like I said, the first 2 companies I worked for, I was the only technician.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured it out.
Yeah.
But it's my belief, and I've talked to many other technicians over the years, and I feel that 7 years in the trade is what it takes to be kind of what I call get your feet under you.
Yep.
After that, you can start working toward running.
I think, honestly, I know for me, I'm more familiar with music education because that was my degree, but I think it's the same thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you that the number of music educators I see that are in their first or second year, I mean, they are wet behind the ears. Like, every once in a while you'll get one that just plops right in. You're like, holy cow, this person was born for this. Like, but most of the time, like, they're overwhelmed, they're overrun, they're outmatched, outgunned, they're out everything. And it just takes time. And some of those folks, they pick it up in 5 years. I think you're right. I think even with an educator, even with 4 or 5 years of education, most of those folks, it's 4 to 7 years for them to start getting the swing of it. I'm thinking of one guy right now who I'll not mention his name, but I think he had 11 to 12 years as just a middling, band director. And then all of a sudden, he was always, he'd reach out to me every couple of years wanting to get out of it or whatever, and never quite sure what he wanted to do. And then all of a sudden the light bulb clicked and it just came on. It's like he finally figured out what it takes to be a good director. And now he's doing a great job. And he left the school he was at that he'd kind of built up, went to a school that has been a decades long kind of failure of underachievement, stuff like that. He's turning that around. And like, I just am so like proud of him. Like, dang, that guy stuck in there and figured it out. And so, yeah, as a store owner, if you're hiring any of these newer folks, whether out of repair school or whatever, like, if it just takes time to be able to be good and fast. And we all know being good and fast is the name of the game for making money and getting the repair done. Like, we got to be good and we got to be quick, reasonably quick, and when they come out, they know how to use the tools, they know how to do the work, but they just haven't repadded 100 clarinets yet coming out of these schools. So, and I think you offered another piece of great advice that repair techs should consider. That if you are a go-getter and if you're someone who's not daunted and you're someone who I can figure anything out, I can fix anything, that if you end up being the lone man at a shop or lone gal at a shop, fine. But other folks would benefit from being part of a team. And so you should need to know yourself to know where you should land for you to have the best chance of guiding a successful career. And if you're the kind of person that like, hey, I would benefit from being part of a team where other people can teach me and show me things and continue my education, there's plenty of shops out there that you can do that with. And be careful that you don't end up the lone wolf at some, remote shop where there's no one there to answer questions and to help you. So got to know thyself, I think.
Sure. One of the things you brought up earlier about advocating and promoting the career through a blog or through access and information and the QR code is we have a lot of that type of information on our website, NAPBIRT.org, that you don't have to build. We've already built it.
Yep.
And you can link right to that.
Yep.
We have a whole page on, I think I want to be a repair technician. And it talks about, like you mentioned earlier, Do you like puzzles? When you look at this picture, what do you see? Do you see, a challenge in front of you that you would want to conquer? Those are the kind of people that might have aptitude toward our industry.
Yep.
And all that we've had that on our site since day one. So of our site. So,
all those repair schools you mentioned are on there. Like there's even sample like bench tests on there to be able to do. Yeah, I spent the afternoon obviously kind of going through. I've been on the site many times before, but today in particular went through it just to get it. And you're right, there's a lot of really great resources and content that one can link to get that information across from.
Yeah, and two, if there's folks out there listening, watching that want to, they're interested in our programs. We want you to be a member, but our most of our programs are available to everyone, and sometimes there's a discount if you are a member. So that's there's things out there available to you, and we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you part of our organization, part of our group, and part of our community. Like we stated earlier, the network is one of the biggest benefits that is, the hardest one to quantify, but it's there. We have the education. The purpose of NAPBIRT is to provide continuing education. Our job is not to take people from raw and become repair and develop them into repair technicians. That's not our purpose.
Right.
Our purpose is continuing education. What do you do? Where do you go? How do you grow?
Yeah,
that's what we do. And we do that through our educational opportunities, which are, as we mentioned, regional clinics, which are typically 1, maybe day and a half, 2-day events all around the country that we have throughout mostly during the fall, winter, early spring time. Those are typically hosted by music stores. Sometimes they're hosted Yamaha hosts one every year during the NAMM show, the Saturday of the NAMM show. We have a regional clinic at the Yamaha facility.
Gotcha. I didn't know that.
The repair schools typically each host one on a Saturday, but a lot of them are at music stores. Mm-hmm. We should have one at your music store.
So, our guys were just talking about that this year, that they want to host one. So yeah.
So that's one. The NAPBIRT University. That is a program we developed when we moved into this facility. Our facility is in Normal, Illinois, Central Illinois. We're 2.5 hours from Chicago, St. Louis, and Indianapolis. And so we're right in the middle. And we have a facility here that has our offices and a research library, and then the other half of the building is a shop. Mm-hmm. And the shop is set up specifically as a training facility. Typically the trainings here are very, very, very focused. And when people want me to, define that, my favorite one is Joe Bakevichus, who's down at KHS in Nashville area, world-renowned flute guy. He did 4 days on the embouchure hole. That's focused.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The one we have coming up in a couple weeks is on lathe, using the lathe. We have another one coming up in early. In the lathe one, we have 1 spot left. You can still register. The one coming up in early December is piston repair, but you're also going to be making tools for piston repair. So it's a combination of making tools and piston repair, and that's sold out. We have one in January on bassoons, just bassoons, and that's sold out. And then we have a couple more that we're working on. We have Ryan Walker from Music Medic is doing one on saxophones. And then Brian Stevenson from Denver is doing one on dent repair coming up after the first of the year. So, the topics vary, but they're intense. They're 4 days, 8 hours a day, and all you're doing is that.
Right.
There's no, you don't have to answer the phone. You don't have to, work on inventory control. You're out of the shop. Right. You're in a dedicated, focused space. Our shop is set up for that, and we only allow 6 students. So it's typically 6-to-1 ratio with the instructor. But we've had every kind of class from the embouchure hole all the way to bass and cello repair, or orchestral strings. We've had just about every instrument focused, and we've had crossover things. We had a person, she's a technician, but she was trained as a jeweler, and so we had a course on metal smithing. So it was metal. We used jewelry techniques to really deep dive into how to manipulate and move metal.
Right.
And also dealing with soldering and brazing, and we even got into a little bit of casting. And all of those had applications in instrument repair. That's what we do at NAPBIRT University. Then of course, our big annual event is our annual conference. And that typically rotates around the country a little bit.
Gotcha.
And so we have a conference typically every April. This coming April, it's in Atlanta, Georgia. And the following year in 2025 or 2026 will be NAPBIRT's 50th anniversary. It'll be back here in Normal. And then I'm working on the location for 2027 at this point. But we are, so the big annual conference, it's a long weekend. It's Friday through Sunday, with clinics starting at noon on Friday, going all the way through the end of the day Sunday. It includes, a big exhibit hall with almost every major supplier. We're now drawing suppliers over from Europe, which is pretty cool. But you can go and touch and feel all the stuff from Music Medic, from Allied Supply, from Farees. Ed Krause is usually there. Gel Smith is usually there. And so we have a draw for, these people to come. It's very cool to go online, look at their catalog.
Sure.
But it's way better if you can touch and feel those tools and get actual hands-on. Many cases, these tool suppliers have their set up so you can try it.
Yeah.
Try it.
Well, and there's other people there who just like other technicians who can just be like,
you use this tool.
I love that tool. Like, don't, not that one.
Let's go over to this booth and I'll show you the one I use.
Yeah.
So those are the things. Also during our conference, which has become very popular, is our garage sale. So people bring old, used equipment, sometimes horns, some mouthpieces, pad cabinets. You never know what's going to show up.
Right.
Lathes. Sometimes people bring a lathe. I bought blacksmithing tools at them before. It's potluck, but
right.
It's pretty fun, and people, get a kick out of it. And during that time, we run 5 clinics at a time. At each clinic session is 90 minutes, and we're running 5 different clinics at each clinic session. And there's no possible way that you can see all the clinics, but we run every clinic 2 times. So there's, I try to build a schedule so that there's something for everybody during every clinic session. But we'll have 20 different clinicians at this upcoming conference.
Gotcha.
And so there's a lot, and then several of the meals are included and coffee breaks. And so there's a lot of social time built in. There's free time a little bit to go out and enjoy the sites. And, frankly, in some cases, traditionally, maybe not so much anymore, but traditionally, the NAPBIRT conference was people's vacation. And so, moving it around kind of helps not only reach our members around the country, but it also helps, people get out of town now and then. Yeah.
What's the cost to attend the national conference?
I haven't set the price. The price for next year isn't set yet, but it's usually around $600 for registration. But like I said, that includes like 3 or 4 meals and coffee breaks and all the education. And then of course you have your hotel expense and that sort of thing.
Yep. And your travel there.
Yeah.
It's money well spent. I mean, I know our techs, they go often and they always come back inspired. They come back with ideas. they come back with, increased network, because that's a thing, especially in the technicians world. It can be a difficult thing to build relationships outside of your own shop. And in order, we've mentioned the network a couple times. It should just kind of bear to go with it that you're going to get out of that what you put into it. So if you want to tap into this network of other repair technicians, you have to go and participate and meet those people. Just paying your dues is not enough to necessarily have those relationships. I guess people will take your call if you tell them you're a fellow NAPBIRT member, but if they don't know you, there's a different thing than when you guys have had coffee together, or you went to dinner together, or whatever. Like, there's just when Lyndon Lance, calls me up and needs something or whatever, I mean, he gets an immediate answer unless I'm doing something like this, and so that level of relationship is just, you got to put the time into it to develop it, but it's definitely worth it.
On our site, on our website, just general stuff like that. We have a message board where people could connect. Obviously, there's many other social media methods for people to connect, but there's technical information. There's serial number list. There's classified ads. And I'll have to say too, the classified ads are, there are certain parts of our website that are only available to registered members once you log in. And then there's other parts that are available to the public. And, so if you're a store owner who wants to put in an ad to advertise for a technician, that's available to you. So that's, something you can do. So job listings, classifieds, so there's 2 tech locators on our NAPBIRT website. There's the public one, and then there's the internal one. And the internal one, if you're a member and you're looking for, I met this person at the NAPBIRT conference, I know their name was Bob, but that's all and I think they're from West Virginia. And so you can go in and search for that person on the inside tech locator. The public one is you have to give permission to your profile. So that way, if John Doe wants to look for a technician to send their trumpet to, they can look for that. But that's the public side, and the difference between the public and the private side.
Gotcha.
Vendor links to all of our vendors. Not all the vendors sell to the general public. You have access to that through there. And our archives and NAPBIRT library listings are listed there. Like I mentioned, here at the training center, we have a library. It's probably the largest banishment repair focused library outside of some private collections that I'm aware of. But because of, we don't have the resources to be a lending library, it's here, it's available. And we have people that do travel here to go through stuff. So, that's one of our benefits as well. And so
all those infos at napbirt.org. I mean, you can definitely go to that and peruse it. But point being, like the very, very reasonable cost to join. There's so much value to be a part of it, and you definitely, as the technicians, if they're serious about their career, should take the initiative to join. If a company, if you own or manage a company, one way you can demonstrate value in your technicians is by paying those dues for them and encouraging them to participate in these events. Definitely should be big thing to do. Those folks are going to build a network of people. They're going to get ingrained into this industry, which is going to help to keep them around for a long term. And they're going to get better and better at the skills they have by being inspired and learning from their other peers. So it's definitely worthwhile doing it. Bill, this has been a really fascinating conversation. This, I think anyone who listened to this, this is definitely going to be such a good use of their time, because not only did we give them all these resources, but more importantly, we solved the problem that has been talked about, I think, my entire professional career of how do we get more people into repair? And I think today you and we solved it. So if everyone will just go do the things we said to do, then this problem is solved. Right. So next week, I think you and I are going to attack the national debt and healthcare. So stay tuned for that. I figure if we can solve this, we can certainly solve these other things as well.
Other things are small.
Yeah, piece of cake. Well, thank you so much for your time. Again, anyone looking for more info or want to reach out to you, head over to napbirt.org, and you can find all these resources and information there. But I think this has been a really, really interesting conversation with a lot of great information share it as well.
Thank you. It's been great, Donovan. And NAPBIRT is, like you said, it's a mouthful. We joke about it in the professional association management industry. When I meet other executives from other associations, oh, what do you do? Or what's your association? And I lay it out, and I said, yeah, well, in 1976, they didn't have any concept of marketing,
right?
And my business card folds, right? But we we're available. NAPBIRT, NAPBIRT .org. If you send anything to .com, we don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
But my personal email is napirt@napirt.org. So it's fairly straightforward, but we're happy to help people the best we can. And if you're on our website, we do have a section where you can ask questions, and then that sends us a message internally, and we can get back to you that way too. But yeah, any way we can help make our goal, your goal, and my goal are probably very similar.
Yep.
Our goals are to get primarily young people involved in music.
Yep. Because
everybody on earth, one way or another, is affected by music.
Yep.
And this is what we do. Music is what we do. When I talk to folks about what I do that are completely unaware, I say, well, if you take the entire music industry, every part of it, from the guys that drive the trucks for the famous artists that go down the road, to the music store owners, to the people that make Gibson guitars, to the people who create beautiful works of music, composers and artists. And if we put us all on a pie chart, our section, the instrument repair section, is smaller than the lines that divide the pieces of the pie. But without our section, this industry doesn't exist. And so I'm proud to be part of it. I've been part of it since I was 18 years old. I've never known anything. This is what I do. I have other hobbies, obviously, but this is what I do, and I love it. And I'm proud to be part of it, and I'm proud to have spent my entire career doing it. And I hope to encourage others to join along on our path, and let's have a good time and keep people playing music.